Well, Dr. Rashawn Ray is a David M. Rubenstein Fellow in Governance Studies at the Brookings Institution and an expert in police-civilian relations. Thanks so much for coming on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
So just first of all, what's your reaction to that payout, $27 million going to the Floyd family?
Well, on one hand, it's unprecedented. I mean, as we know, it's pretty much the most amount that has been awarded for a civil proceeding as it relates to a pretrial leading up to the person who actually did the act. On the other hand, however, there is no amount of money that can bring back a loved one. We heard that from George Floyd's brother. And I also think that the attorney, Benjamin Crump, made a good point about policy. That policy is the next step that needs to change to ensure that what we saw happen last year is something that can never happen again.
So what kind of policies would you like to see change?
Well, I think the biggest one that people have to recognize is that this $27 million is pretty much coming from taxpayer dollars in Minneapolis. And part of what needs to change is that we need to shift taxpayers being responsible for these civil payouts to police department insurance policies and even police officer liability insurance. From 2015 through 2019, across the United States, over $2 billion was paid out for civil settlements for police misconduct. This is something that simply has to change. There is a lack of accountability, and due to qualified immunity, which, mind you, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which was passed again by the House of Representatives, will actually address, will lead to more accountability on behalf of police departments and police officers.
Well, that's an interesting idea. Do you know, is there any precedent for that idea?
Well, we have a lot of precedent for that idea in pretty much every other profession. Healthcare, people who drive 18-wheelers, attorneys. But for some reason, we do not do it when it comes to law enforcement. And I think that is something that people are starting to pay attention to. They say if you go in for a surgery, for a procedure, if you're dealing with another person who is in a specialty position, oftentimes they carry liability insurance. While I'm not against that for law enforcement, I think that's important, but we also need to ensure that the police department is also held accountable. Now, the municipality will still pay out the premium, but what it will lead to is police chiefs being able to look at a person like Derek Chauvin and say, you know what, you have cost our city and our department millions of dollars. It will lead to a level of accountability and lead to us being able to get these bad apples out of law enforcement that rotten the entire tree.
Just before I let you go, we spoke a lot a year ago or so now. Where do you think we are a year on? Are you surprised, satisfied with momentum, with changes so far, or disappointed?
Well, I think things are moving forward in the way that people expect for them to. Obviously, the 2020 election was going to be big, and President Biden is delivering on his promises around dealing with diversity. And then I think we're going to see a huge push dealing with criminal justice reform. We know that the COVID relief bill was just passed. We know that there was some other legislation that needed to go through, but I fully expect for police reform and criminal justice reform more broadly to be addressed.
Rashawn Ray, great to have you on again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis.